Weisman, live in Dayton, have been born in Poland in 1930. And you know, in summer of 1939, the two most ruthless dictators aligned, invaded Poland, and occupied our city. My family were living in Lodz at that time. It's a city of about 1 million people, half of them, about 250,000, were Jewish. As soon as the Nazis occupied the city, they immediately start preparing for the ghetto, start resettling the Jews to one particular area, build bridges, fences, and every day they came into the city, to the fenced-in ghetto, and they took out people allegedly to work. Some never came back. Some came back beaten up, half dead, and this was going on during the period I was there. In about December 1939, I was caught on my way to school one morning. I was directed on the street to go a particular corner where a truck was waiting, and I was pushed in order to go on the truck.
Who pushed you, Murray?
Assessmen were all over the streets with guns and bayonets, and everybody who was in the street, they pushed, had to go up on the truck. No other way, no escape. As the truck was full, they took us about 5 to 10 miles outside the city, where a long line of trains, cattle trains, were waiting, standing and waiting for us. Snow was there, and they start screaming and yelling, emptying the trucks as they come along, and entering to make us enter to the trains. The people younger people who can run faster, they went up to the train, but the older people who could not run as fast were shot right in the place, and dozens of people were shot right there. Again, my impression at this time, I did not fully understand. It didn't seem to me real. I did not comprehend what it's all about. Finally, when the trains were full, the doors of the train were locked, sealed. Assessmen were on top of the train with machine guns, and we were on a way to an unknown destination. We traveled for about a day and a half. We were crowded, cold, hungry, and I still did not know what's all about. It was, for me, in that time, it was more excitement than fear. I was young. I did not comprehend the nature of this problem. But I heard what all the people were talking among themselves. They said, oh, they're taking us to work. They're not going to kill us because they need our work. And eventually we will be in Germany somewhere to do the work for them.
How did they know you were Jewish when they pulled you off the street at that time?
In Europe, particularly in Poland, you can easily identify the Jewish people. And many times if somebody starts screaming he is not Jewish, they ask you to show the sex organ to recognize whether you're circumcised or not. That's what I did. But usually they recognize, because along with the assessment, there were Polish people too who participated and assisted them. They identified this. They could tell which one is Jewish. Although we lived the neighborhood in that time were strictly Jewish. It's a ghetto. Where non-Jewish didn't live there anymore. So they presumed that everybody who was there was Jewish.
Murray, you were on that train in cattle car with how many people do you
I
feel?
have no idea what I would estimate now. That must be about 100 people in the train. It was very crowded. You know, when the train was shaking, the whole mass was shaking in the train. And very difficult, you know. Fortunately, there were some space between the boards that we got enough air to breathe.
Because otherwise you wouldn't.
Otherwise we could have suffocated.
And then what happened?
Then we arrived to a place which is known Grunov. That was, it's now East Germany. This is a stretch of between Posen in Frankfurt am Main and the east, where every 3 miles they had such a camp were in preparation for building a road on the highway, what they ever have. So when we came to that camp and looked at it from the outside, we could see the defense, and there were huge tents on the camp, like buildings, large tents, and people with blue-white uniforms, wooden shoes, shaved head, all were standing on a place and jumping, and a big orchestra was playing marches, and the first impression I got, it's a circus, such a huge circus with so many unordinate number of clowns. I didn't understand what's going on there, till finally, once they start screaming and yelling and beating us, they get off quickly, went onto the camp, and they start directing us to unclose, take off the clothes. So we had to went through and made it one line. We took off our clothes, and we had to put each, they were very systematic on this. We had to put the jacket one place, the pants in another place, the shoes in a third place. And if you have teeth, rings, watches, this have been bells standing, and everything had to be out. And they were watching on both sides. They didn't let you have anything, just the hand like this, and you had to go through. As soon as when you come to the end of this line, they had a guy sitting there and with a pen and made the arm number. And when you went one next step, they looked you on your mouth. When apparently they look for gold, hidden gold or whatever, and they see if you have anything there. And the next step, they shaved your head. And finally they send you to a shower, you got a shower. And then there was another line, and they gave you the clothes, the uniforms. And then it said, it happens so that they didn't measure. They just, whenever it comes along, because they were piled up pants, and a tall guy got short sleeves and short pants, and I got long pants. So fortunately we were able to exchange. And once we got undressed, before we put on the clothes, we still had, and it was a doctor apparently, we didn't know, I didn't know that time, and started ordering, giving directions which way to go. And when I approached, he approached me, asked me, how old are you? Well, I said, that time I was 9, I said I was 13. And because people already got the message and told me. And he asked me, what can you do? So I'm a carpenter, fortunately. And he said, all right, I see. If you are not a carpenter, if you're lying, you're going to be shot right there. So he let me get by with a working group. And as soon we got by that, it was in the evening. And they pushed us, directed us to go to a pile of straw, huge pile of straw, and gave us sacks like a mattress. And we had to fill up the straw in that sack, and this was our mattress. And then they directed us to go to the tent. And that time we saw them tired and fearful, not knowing exactly what's going on, what's happening. And we just lay down. And soon we lay down on the sack of straw. Assessment came in with dogs, sniffing, smelling whether we didn't hide anything or didn't bring it away, searched and jumped on us and tear us and bit us. And After this inquisition went through, they left us alone. We fell asleep.
You had not
we
eaten?
were hungry, and very, very hungry at that time. But the next day, they woke us up about, again, we didn't have any watch, we didn't know the time, but they woke us up, it was quite dark, and we had to straighten out the mattress, the sack of straw, and we had a blanket covered with a blanket too, and it has to be, they directed to a microphone how to, the blanket, to keep it straight and neat. And once we finished, this gave us about 5 minutes for that. We got dressed quickly, they chased us outside. And then they gave us we had each one got a cup of coffee, black ersatz, artificial coffee, and a slice of dark bread. And once we had that, they send us to the place, Anstellung, but each morning and each evening, they had a place where everybody had to stand in line where they counted us in formation of 5 and groups of hundreds or 200s. And we stand in the line for hours till they counted everybody. It doesn't matter, dead or alive. And when you fell down, you couldn't stand, so they still counted you. And later on, they disposed of the body if somebody was dead. And then they assigned, after they took us out, we marched, I don't know, a couple miles, and they took us to wooded area. And it was heavy snow on the ground, and they made us stop, walk on the snow. We couldn't figure out what it is, but it was cold, freezing, so you had to be in motion a whole day. You had to go and stamp where there was knock down the snow. Later on, we figured out that this is the place where they want to make the road. So they want to reduce the snow, flatten the snow, that they can cut the trees, and that was our work. And we did clear the snow, cut the trees, and we made roads. The Autobahn was built from Frankfurt to Posen. And we worked there a whole day. In the evening, of course, there was beating. Dogs, when the assessment was watching that we were active, that we don't sit around or talk, was not allowed. And once we completed the whole work, they started counting us again, setting us in a group, marching in formations back home to the camp. And then in the camp, we stayed another hour or longer. I don't know, there was about 10,000 people in the camp. They had to count it to make sure that everybody is, and they had to search us. Even we were a whole day in the guard. No one could go away for a step without keeping watch. They still suspected us. They searched us, whether we didn't pick up any weapons or we didn't pick up any contraband, whatever. They kept on searching us when we left and when we came back. Well, once we got back to the camp and they finished counting us, they let us go back to our barracks, or at that time it was still the tents. But keep in mind, that was in late '39. The camp was not physically completed. All what they have are tents and an office for the assessment building, and the rest they are in the progress. There was no water, no facilities to wash, no toilet facilities, no paper to use, no tables, nothing was there, but yet we had to be clean, we had to be in time, everything has to be done as if everything would be available then. Now, once we got back to the tents, they brought in barrels, they brought the soup, and they gave us a metal plate and a bowl of soup, which was essentially water in grass, some kind of grass. And once we swallowed this down, we sipped this down, then we began to feel the hunger. The soup only agitate our appetite. And once we finished, after this meal. We had to clean our dishes. Then, because they had an inspection to see whether our dishes are clean. So again, we had to stand in the line, and the assessment went through and checked our dishes. And we did the best thing we could. We wiped it out with our clothes, clean. And assessment comes and asks the guy to me on the right side, who says, "Did you clean this?" He said, "Yes." And then he started hitting him. "Is this clean? You call this clean?" And he started hitting him and kicking him with it over his head and his face. So I said, he said he cleaned it. It wasn't. So I said, maybe I didn't. I didn't clean it because I didn't have any water. Before I was able to give the explanation, he started hitting me why I didn't clean it. In other words, you couldn't win. Whatever you say was wrong. So after we went through this inquisition, they made us go around in the camp, pick grass, dirt, whatever, to clean up the place. And at that time we have an opportunity to talk to the older prisoners, and they told us what it is like. You know, we began to realize that's a place of torture, death, and misery. So this was going on day after day. You got up in the morning under heavy abuse, fighting. You went to work, and there you were abused, you were beaten for not working fast enough. And after about 2 or 3 months of this type of conditions, people began to get swollen legs. Some of them already committed suicide. They went around to the fence. They couldn't endure the pain. And some of them were sick, got swollen, they couldn't go on. So I think it was one Friday, and they had picked about 45 or 50 people who were sick, they couldn't go to work. And they took us, there was again, the big place, the Platz, what they call the Anstellungplatz, where all executions were performed there. So the assessment were standing, there was a big truck with a platform down, and the assessment were standing in lines too with clubs, guns, and we were in the periphery, a circle made of all the prisoners, might be about 10,000. And when those 50 prisoners, inmates, the sick ones, had to go through those lines, and the SS hit them till they dropped it or they screamed, the blood was flowing, and everybody was pushed on the truck. And on the truck, they were in each corner on the truck was a gun with a machine gun, and shoot them all. And then he made a speech. Anybody who's not going to work is going to play sick, that will be your fate. And the truck took off, we don't know where, and that was the first scene of mass murder I witnessed. Then I became to realize what we are up to. So we were in that camp, I was there about a year. And then they took us to another camp, to about 10 miles to another camp. I don't know why they switched us to a different camp. Again, the idea, my understanding is that they didn't want us to get acquainted with terrain, make contacts, or get used to get complacent. So they switched us to new areas. They had to make the new adjustment, new selections. And this is the way they screamed the whole process. And for about a half a year I was in, that was about in the late 40s. They, for some reason, they took all the people, the road was already completed, because what we did is we cleaned out the ground, make it straight for everything was necessary to make a road. Lakes, we have to clean lakes in the cold winter time. For they had an idea we had to go in with our clothes in the lake and pick out weeds from the lake for whatever reason. They know they got to clean it out. They want to divert it or whatever they wanted to do to get the road across. So I was in about 3 of those camps, Zelchov, Grunov, and Nordhausen. Those are the 3, if I remember them. And finally, at the late 1940, they took us to a real camp. They took us to Auschwitz. Again, that was the real thing. At that time, the crematoriums they started building. They are not finished yet. But the whole camp, we were about several camps together, the small ones. Everybody was cleared out, and they took us.
Had you heard anything about crematoriums up until that point?
No, no, we don't. We know that they burned people in masses, and that's what we saw in Auschwitz, where they had a huge, huge hole, a couple blocks long, deep, digged, and very nicely done in a slated way, you know.
Slanted way.
A slanted way, you know. And it was piled up. People from the train were dying. People who were shot who couldn't go or couldn't do anymore. So they piled up a huge mass of people in Auschwitz in that time. And they put wood around the edges, and they put some gas or any other, and they put it on flame, and people burned. You must be there, hundreds and hundreds of people piled up on the top of the other throwing in. And funny, when they made people pile up symmetrically, one this way and one this way, one this way and one this way. The people have been voting, prisoners have been voting on this. They have been orderly piled up in rows till filled up, and they burned them to death. And Auschwitz was a different, complete different problem. And the work of us, of course, was not as over there we worked on the road, we were outside. In Auschwitz, you did not work outside, you worked inside. And all what it is a torture work. Dig stones, dig holes and put them back together just for the sake of torturing. And every Friday, again, they made a real serious selections, and they put one side and another side. One time, I was pushed to the side, which I know the left side was, I run back, and they start shooting after me, but I was running among the prisoners, and then the one SS told the other, don't bother him, we catch him the next time. So I was there. That was really, in 1941 and 42 was the most difficult time in Auschwitz, because they are engaged in a massive action of torture. Every time they chased you around, whether you were at work, whether you were in the barrack, they did not let you for a minute. The continuous pressure of hunger pangs, and sometimes thirst. We didn't have any water either. It was so painful and so demoralizing that all what you prayed, you wish you were dead, because to stop the suffering. But the beating, the abuse, the physical abuse, wherever you moved, wherever you had assessment all over the place, and they also engaged non-assessment, like the German professional criminals. They were the supervisors, they were the foremans, they were the capos. And they did just as well as the assessment themselves. They were trained, they were selected for that purpose, and they were too in themselves mass murderers. And this is the way it was going on. And finally, after I was there about a year in Auschwitz, they took me to Buna. I was shipped to Buna. In Buna, it was a little easier, because the Buna was the camp, limited camp, and then in the camp there was a huge other camp where they had a lot of factories, like the IG Farben industry. They had a synthetic rubber factory. And of course, I kept saying that I'm an, of course, they went through the same selection, the same process. Once I was there, I said I was a carpenter, so they assigned me to a group to working as a carpenter. So we had, our job was in this particular group was to insulate pipes. There's a lot of pipes running all over the place. And we had to go on a very tiny wire with a board, and here's a wire, and here's a board was laying. We had to climb up there and stand there at the insulated pipes. It was cold in winter, and I was afraid the wind could blow me off. So I was one day, and I started watching, and I just hold on, I couldn't lift. I had to lift up boards and make it up there and then insulate the pipes. So I was fortunate. I had one Jewish man who was overseeing the work. He was responsible for the work because he was the older there. And he said, Motke, I want to let you go up there. So he protected me. He gave me something to do downstairs.
Matka was your Hebrew name.
Yeah, the Jewish name. But unfortunately, 2 days later, they shot it and put another bastard on this place, and he was missed, this guy. And your mind was continuously preoccupied how to get something to eat. You couldn't function like a normal human being. If you imagine, take for instance, when you fast a day or two, what do you think about? If you eat nothing. But if this goes on day, week after week, month after month, you become kind of instinctual animal. All you're preoccupied is look around and find something to eat on the floor, on the ground, or wherever you could. And there was any feeling of resistance or semblance is completely destroyed. They destroyed your self-image. They destroyed everything you could, a human has. And this was going on and on forever. Once I was in Buna, it was relatively mild because the beating stopped, because you had a job to do. Mm-hmm. So the beating wasn't, there was occasional beating. For instance, when you marched to work and from work, you had to sing. And if you didn't sing, they saw you didn't sing, they beat you. Or if you stood idle, or if you want to go to the toilet, they beat you. But essentially, they want you to do the work. They want to finish the factory work. So the beating per se was not as brutal as it was in Auschwitz, as it was in some other camps. So in Buna, there was more or less a paradise by comparison that was particularly in the later years. In 44, it starts getting much milder, you know. And of course, they still kept screening. They kept selecting. The weak people, they still selected to burn them, to gas them. And the healthy people, they still kept using and working as much as they could.
Through all this time, you had no idea what happened to your family?
No. No, we had some premonitions. Of course, when people came to the camp, we always had, when the people who were there were killed or gassed or died, they had to replenish those people. You have to have a certain number of people that the German military government was in agreement with those companies, private German companies, that you have to supply me 10,000 people workers. So those who died have to be replaced, and there constantly came new people. At one point, there's a group came from Lodz, from my town, and who told me that my parents were gone already. The exact date, where, the method, how they've been killed, but I have a suspicion that during that period, that all the people from the Warsaw Ghetto went to Treblinka, where they have been gassed and killed there. This I know, but I don't know the exact date.
You were in Brno till when, Mayor?
I went in Buna till they took us to Gleiwitz. Once we were in Buna for, I think, 2 years, a year and a half, over a year and a half. So the American advanced and the French and the Russians advanced. Two important things would happen to me in Buna. We worked on Sunday, Saturday, every day. And one Sunday, the Russians came periodically and attacked and bombed the place. And the Germans, they run into the bunkers. They had a big bunkers, cement. And on a Sunday, I figured I'd take a chance. I run to the bunker too. You know. So the Nazis say, "You damn Jew, you don't belong here. You get out, you get killed." So I was afraid to run back because running during the alarm was suicide because they say you are a spy. So I stood like this near a pool, and I saw coming down a couple of planes and smashed that whole bunker to places, including the Nazi who didn't let me in. That was a good hope for me. You know. When both the Russian army on one side advanced and the American advanced, they tried to clear the camp. Apparently they have all intentions in that time to take all the prisoners out to the deep Germany to save us. And they kept making speeches, deceptive speeches that we need you to work, we're going to take you to Germany to work there. So they made assemble us all on the place, and they took us on a march to Gleiwitz. It was 2.5 days. It was heavy snow, and many people, I don't know, there were about 20,000 people in Buna. About 1/3 died that march. We have to go, it was the heavy snow, we didn't have any good shoes. So the snow was kind of brown and wet. You stepped in the snow, you kept going. You half asleep. You slept in your walk, And both sides were assessment with dogs, motorcycles, and we went for 2.5 days without food, without anything, till finally we arrived at a destination called Gleiwitz. Gleiwitz, there was a central point where all the prisoners from different camps were assembled, and they put us on a train and taking us to inside Germany. This was an extremely miserable experience. You were hungry. In sleep, you were just like a weed, a broken, died-out weed, because you couldn't go, but you just automatically kept on moving. Pull out one leg, and they kept yelling, "Go schnell, mach schnell, go schnell," and beating. People were falling from both sides. Somebody dropped down, he was stepped on it by the other prisoners, and no mercy. No one cared about anybody else. It just was a terrible experience. Anyway, we stayed there for a while, and then we went on trains that took us to the trains, and again, getting up the train was very difficult. Many people were shot. I saw some people were trying to run away, and a bunch of SS men running after them and shot them. And when we went on the train, there was a long line of trains, maybe hundreds of them. And people who could not get up were killed. People who got up, and we traveled for 8 days, 8 nights, because we had to clear the lines for military transportation back and forth. So anytime when the military was supposed to come by, they put us on the side and we waited. Anytime we were stopped under a bridge where German people assembled and threw rocks at us, or cold water in the wintertime. And of course, hunger, at this point you didn't feel any hunger, but we were thirsty. We didn't have anything to drink. So we had a can, I had a can, and an empty can and put a string attached to the string and let it out from the, and we picked up some snow, and that was our nourishment. So we wet our lips from the little snow that we can pick up. And at that time, I was taken to Dora. Dora was another camp where the Germans make the VFs. You know, the whole factory was built on a heavy mountain of rocks that a bomb could not touch it. And that, apparently the Nazis knew that they were losing the war at that time. And here too I had a lucky experience where the Americans kept bombing every day. They couldn't bomb the rocks, so they bombed the surroundings, the access where the trains come. And there was one train, a locomotive, which when the Americans came, so I wanted to get to the locomotive, hide myself, so foolish enough. And again, a Nazi said, you Jew, you don't belong here, you go. Again, I was afraid. I stood there myself, like about a telephone pole. I stood there and was afraid to look up. This way you had to be, not to be suspected as a spy. And an American plane came down and shot that train to pieces, including that Nazi who didn't let me down. This is another beautiful experience I visualized. So over there was a very, and we had to clear up. My job with another group was to clear up. As soon as the railroads were smashed to pieces, we had to take the old ones, put new ones in that they can, the Americans destroyed it and we built it. And we had there one Nazi, one SS man, who came down every morning. He was like a wild beast. He's running. He always had something in his hand, a shovel or pick. And he said, I cannot go to eat breakfast till I kill a couple of them.
Couple of Jews?
A couple of Jews, a couple of prisoners, yeah. And he did it. And I was one of the victims. He bayoneted me with my shoulders with a bayonet. He thought I'm dead. He left. And he accomplished his goal. So after he went away and the friends tried to help me, we put some clay on my wounds to cover the blood. In that time, I was already sick. I couldn't do anything much. I could work, except I got the protection from the friends who helped me, you know. But I was in Buchenwald in Dora about a month, and then they took us to Buchenwald. In Buchenwald, that time was not bad. I was in a block among the youngsters. We had a block, special youngsters. What they only had to do, carry bricks from one place to another, and there wasn't so much beating. We have civilians supervise us. You know, it wasn't bad.
That was in the last year.
In the last couple of weeks in Buchenwald, I want to close it up. In the last couple of weeks in Buchenwald was not as much as a beating. But the Nazis still wanted to, when they wanted to evacuate everybody, when the Americans advanced, so they want to take out all the prisoners, and many of them they took out and killed, either in the woods or throw them in the Baltic somewhere, and they drowned them in the Baltic. And every morning they say, appeal, stand up, and I said, oh, that's enough, I cannot go anymore. So this is what I crawled in among a pile of dead people. There were, of course, dead people all over laying the place, and I just lay there because I was wounded. I couldn't move, I couldn't go anywhere. So I was there for 2 days till I heard a new voices, and the Americans have liberated me. When I was in concentration camp, I was hoping once I was liberated, I will go to the woods and live by myself and get away from civilization at all, and avoid it. Because I learned to recognize what people are capable of doing, and the best way to avoid it is to get away from them. You know. And it's again, to my experience, I didn't find a single Nazi who displayed some feeling of humanity or concern towards others. All were trained, conditioned, and executed all brutality they can. And I have here a quote from a German foreign minister, Hans Dietrich, who addressed a group in June '85. He said, "Only a few Germans can be described as true resistors, fighters. The mass of the German people, also its soldiers, accepted the tyranny with dull, unshakable loyalty as a way to achieve a superior race and control the world." Yeah. So once I came to Paris, I began to get acclimatized to civilization, to nice things in Paris. So I saw movies, operas, music. So I'm not going to the woods. I make an adjustment, and I started going to school and rebuilding my life, and ultimately I had the opportunity, and I came to the United States, and I got my education here, got my law degree, my psychology degree, and here I am.
You must not say that you now walk the final way, because the darkened heavens hide the blue of day. The time we've longed for will at last draw near, and our steps as drums will sound that we are here. From land all green with palms to lands all white with snow, we now arrive with all our pain and all our woe, where our blood sprayed out and came to touch the land. There our courage and our faith will rise and stand.